At its peak, Shameless wasn't just another cable drama. It was a punch in the gut, a shot of whiskey, and a slap in the face all rolled into one. It was raw, hilarious, unforgiving, and for a while, completely addictive. But somewhere along the way, it lost everything that made it great. Characters became caricatures, meaningful arcs turned into loops, and emotional weight was traded for mindless shock. So what went wrong? How did one of TV's most fearless shows unravel into a repetitive mess that fans couldn't even finish? The warning signs were there all along. In fact, Shameless started falling apart the moment it reached its highest high. Back in 2011, Showtime needed a hit. Dexter had started to lose steam and nothing else was cutting through the noise. Enter Shameless, a risky American remake of a cult favorite British series. Showrunner John Wells, who'd already found success with ER and The West Wing, decided to push the envelope even further. The premise was simple but brutal. A deadbeat alcoholic father, 6 kids raising themselves in Southside Chicago, and a life defined by poverty, addiction, and chaos. But it was the execution that stunned people. The show didn't tiptoe around dysfunction, it wallowed in it. It made you laugh at things you weren't supposed to. It made you care about people society had written off. And then came Frank Gallagher. Played with disturbing brilliance by William H. Macy, Frank wasn't just flawed, he was the embodiment of moral decay. He lied, cheated, abandoned, exploited, and still found new lows every season. Yet somehow you kept watching, maybe because of the cast around him. Fiona, the fierce older sister who sacrificed everything. Lip, the genius with a self-destructive streak. Ian, caught between identity and instability. Debbie, Carl, and Liam, each fighting for a version of love and security in a world that offered neither. Together, they made up a broken family that felt shockingly real. Seasons 1 through 4 were shameless at its most powerful. Every episode felt like a chaotic masterpiece, equal parts crude and crushing. Whether it was Fiona juggling 3 jobs while hiding her heartbreak, or Lip dragging himself to college while his family fell apart back home, the stakes always felt high, and the humor was dark but purposeful. The writing had a rhythm, outrageous situations grounded by real emotion. Every Gallagher was a mess, but you understood why. They weren't stereotypes, they were survivors. The blend of poverty, politics, sex, addiction, and broken dreams didn't feel like cheap entertainment. It felt honest, even when it was insane. Season 4's finale is widely considered the high point. Frank, on the edge of death, finally gets a liver transplant. He's told he can't drink ever again. And what does he do? He escapes the hospital with Carl and downs a drink by the lake. It was disgusting. It was funny. It was weirdly beautiful. For one fleeting moment, Frank was both the worst father imaginable and the only father Carl ever had. That scene was everything Shameless stood for. And then came the twist. The post-credits scene in season 4 dropped like a bomb. Jimmy, Fiona's long-gone ex, suddenly reappears, and with him came the first major crack in Shameless's foundation. Fiona had already gone through a complete arc with Jimmy, falling in love, watching it implode, and finally learning to stand on her own. But instead of evolving her character, the writers dragged her right back into the same relationship rut. It was frustrating, but more importantly, it was familiar. Not in a nostalgic way, but in a lazy one. From that point on, Shameless started relying on old tricks to fill new episodes. The energy shifted. We weren't moving forward and we were looping. Fans felt it too. Online forums lit up with criticism. People began noticing how storylines were recycling. Instead of deepening characters, the show just hit replay with a fresh coat of paint. Jimmy's return wasn't just a failed twist. It was a red flag. After season 4, Shameless entered a new phase, one defined by burnout and repetition. Fiona couldn't hold down a job or a relationship. Lip kept spiraling and rebuilding, only to crash again. Ian's relationships became a carousel of drama with little emotional payoff. The writing was still sharp, but it lacked purpose. There were still great episodes, no doubt, but the narrative momentum had stalled. Characters stopped learning from their mistakes. Emotional arcs were started, abandoned, or reset entirely. It felt like the show was afraid to let the Gallaghers grow, afraid that change would kill what made them lovable. The irony? It did the opposite. Fans wanted to see progress. They wanted to see Lip graduate, Fiona succeed, Ian stabilize, But the show was stuck in a loop where no one could rise above their worst instincts for more than an episode or two. Then came the biggest blow, Emmy Rossum's departure. After 9 seasons, Fiona said goodbye. Her final episodes were among the show's strongest in years. But when she walked out that door, the heart of Shameless went with her. With Fiona gone, the show lost its anchor, and it showed. Lip, once the brilliant mess we rooted for, suddenly became a neglectful dad with no real explanation. His downward spiral was no longer tragic. It was unwatchable. He chain-smoked near his infant son, left him alone, and constantly failed to cope. The writing didn't explore his pain. It just amplified his worst qualities and expected us to go along with it. Then there was Frank, somehow still alive, somehow still scheming. In one of the most baffling storylines, he tries to auction off a baby. Again, that exact plot had already happened back in season 2. Only this time, it was done with less humor, less heart, and zero shock factor. The writers weren't just out of ideas, they were recycling garbage and hoping we wouldn't notice. And Carl, his cop training hostage situations crossed into complete absurdity. What once felt edgy now felt forced, like a show that had forgotten how to be outrageous in a way that mattered. In its early days, Shameless pushed boundaries for a reason. It wanted to make you uncomfortable so you'd see things from a different angle. But by its final seasons, the show wasn't challenging viewers. It was just throwing out shock for the sake of it. There was no emotional core holding it together. Frank's schemes weren't funny or tragic anymore. They were just gross. The same jokes were rehashed with more cruelty and less context. Other shows like It's Always Sunny managed to stay fresh and provocative without losing their soul. Shameless couldn't. It stopped being satire and became a parody of itself. You'd hope a show like Shameless would go out with a bang. But season 11 barely made a sound. The characters were hollow, the plots were tired, and then came the 2021 lockdown period. A slow, strange detour that added nothing and felt completely disconnected from the world Shameless had built. When Frank finally died, it was underwhelming. The family barely noticed. He overdosed and faded into nothing, with no one around to grieve. No explosive send-off, no messy goodbye, just silence. And that silence said everything. The writers had nothing left to say. After 11 seasons of chaos, there was no emotional payoff, just apathy. Shameless was never meant to be clean or comfortable. It thrived in chaos. But even chaos needs a compass. And by the end, this show had none. It traded in raw storytelling for recycled shock. It abandoned growth for stagnation. And it forgot why we loved the Gallaghers in the first place. Maybe it was Showtime clinging to its cash cow. Maybe it was creative fatigue. Or maybe, just maybe, Shameless was never supposed to last this long. The Gallaghers were born into survival, not success. And that's what made them relatable. But when survival became a gimmick, the magic disappeared. So now we ask, when did you stop watching? Was it Fiona's exit, Frank's final stunt, or just the slow fade into nothing? Let us know in the comments. And if this breakdown hit home, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the shows we used to love and what really happened behind the scenes.